Hello to everyone and welcome from Melbourne, Australia. It is, as always, a pleasure to be invited to the World Aging Festival to discuss health and exercise, especially this year with the festival themed Rethinking the Way We Care for Older People. My name is Tuire Karaharju-Huisman and I am from HUR, Australia. Now, when we think about older people, let's put them in the centre. Let's start discussing the patient-centred care and especially the health of older people. Now, to discuss the health, it's good to start discussing the determinants of health, something we've discussed in the 70s, when we divide the health into a few components: biological, behavioural, sociocultural, economic, and also ecological parts of determinants of our health. We can also divide these into 4 pillars that create the foundations for our health, where we mean nutrition, lifestyle, environment, and also genetics. Now, these are the 4 main pillars, but sometimes these pillars fail. And then we also need to include the 5th pillar, being medical care, that can be there to support if these determinants fail. Now, if we think about environment, some of us might be living in cities that are quite crammed and highly polluted. Others might be living on the beachside or in vast areas with lots of fresh air. Some of us might be living alone or might be living in the large complexes. That's something we can't change that easily. In a similar way, we're born with a particular genetic structure. Some of us might be prone to diseases, some might be born with diseases. There's nothing we can do about. But then if we think about our nutrition and lifestyle, these are the 2 things that we are in charge of. These are the 2 things that we have the control of. This is what we call the modifiable lifetime factors. So with nutrition, we often talk about especially our calcium intake, our vitamin D intake, and our protein intake, and also our iron levels and generally our minerals. And then we talk about the healthy fats and bad fats. So our nutrition plays a huge role in how healthy we can be. Do we eat healthy or do we unhealthy? And do we provide to our body the ingredients that it needs to be the best it can be? Also, we decide on our lifestyle. Are we living an active lifestyle, or do we have a sedentary lifestyle when we mainly stay inside and don't move enough? I mean, some of us can't move, so these are the reasons. But if we are generally healthy, it's up to us to decide how much we move. And these are really the things that we can have the control when we're trying to improve our health. So when we talk about this, let's go back to the nutrition a little bit and how nutrition and exercise work together. Some of the big diseases that we've discussed in the last decades are osteoporosis, so that when our bones start brittling, so especially in the trabecular bone that we have in our femoral neck and our wrists and in our spine. So if we don't have enough calcium and vitamin D, basically the bones just fall apart and then causing fractures, which then can be bad for our health. And in a similar manner, if we don't have enough protein, we might be losing our muscles. And it's a disease called sarcopenia, which is something that hasn't been discussed for that long time, but in the last decades has been quite important. So let's take a look at what happens in the muscles. In the little video, you can see there how the muscles are shrinking away over the decades, because the reality is that our muscles start vanishing already in our 20s, but it becomes a bit more radical in the 40s. So basically, the aging process is characterized by a gradual and progressive loss of muscle tissue, strength, and endurance. But apart from these as well, the one component that we lose even before muscle mass and muscle strength is actually muscle power. And the muscle power is the thing that allows us to stand up from a chair, allows us to walk, and also allows us to go upstairs. So it's quite important to really focus on power training and training in a good way. And also part of the power training, we're training the muscles in a concentric, so in actively doing a movement, and also eccentric manner where we resist the movement. So for example, in our biceps curl, the concentric is the one where we bend the elbow, and eccentric is when we lower to the basic point. So we train in both concentric and eccentric. Another thing that's important to think about is the muscle fibers. So we have these low twitch muscle fibers and fast twitch. And when we get older, it is important to try to train these fast twitch muscles, as we know that a lot of the falls, so 79% of falls, relate to trips, slips, and stumbles. So us either slipping the ground under our foot, or we tripping or stumbling over something. And sometimes we can try to avoid the fall, like even if we have the actual event, we can try to stop the fall by reacting quickly. So we really do need to have those fast twitch muscles. So we need to be able to do the speed training. That is, again, with pneumatic exercises such as the HUR equipment, it is good that we can do the speed training, because with those equipment, with the pneumatic, the resistance remains the same, even if you are doing a fast training. Now let's look at a little bit about the statistics. So after the age of 40, the amount of muscle tissue that we decreases by 8% by a decade. But if you then get older, by the time we get to the age of 70, this acceleration is 15% per decade. So we're talking about quite a rapid muscle loss unless we do something about it. Then we can talk about, we have the muscle loss, but what are the actual consequences of muscle loss? So in the recent years and decades, we've now talked about exercise as medicine. And the big thing that we have been able to link with the research is really the impact the muscles have in the treatment of chronic diseases. So we've been talking about different things such as, type 2 diabetes, because we know that the muscles actually keep on staying active for 48 hours. So we can try to control the glucose a little bit. But let's look at all these consequences. And there's quite a list here. And really, even the first one is we have our brain volume and cognition. We know that our cognition goes down, and vice versa. If we do exercise properly, if we do strength training appropriately with appropriate resistance and progression, we know that we can actually reverse mild cognitive decline. So if we start having a little bit of memory issues by strength training properly, not just going for a walk, but actually trying to do some strength training exercises, we can try to reverse that. Also, our immunity goes down because, as I said before, our protein is part of creating the cells. And especially if we're trying to recover from an illness, we need to recreate the new cells, which means we need to have protein reserves. And again, if the protein is stored in our muscles, we need to have our muscles, so the reserve banks really, where we can then do the withdrawal and take the protein that we require in order to get rid of the disease, to rebuild the muscles that to rebuild the cells that are called then basically the immunity. Also, if we then have the muscle loss, we have sarcopenia, we don't have the muscles, we don't have the reaction time, so therefore our falls are also increased. Our strength and mobility go down because we become too afraid of falling, and our muscles are shrinking. So therefore, we don't have the muscles and we can't move because we don't have the muscles that move our bones around. Consequently, also because we don't move and therefore we don't have impact forces, our risk of osteoporosis goes up, but also our life expectancy is actually going down. Also, we talked about before how muscles then are talking about the metabolic rate. So therefore, our weight is actually might go up, and also our risk of type 2 diabetes might actually increase. In the same manner, we might have poorer outcomes for cancer treatments, and also we might have an increase in hospital complications. So it is a bit of a vicious circle, this inactivity business. So if we're inactive, our muscles are shrinking, and therefore we have all these consequences. So it is quite important that we actually take the chance on us and we start being active. We eat the protein and eat the minerals, and also start training our muscles in order to stay healthy. Now, so it doesn't really matter what age group we are in, if we're in our 50s, if in our 70s, or in our 90s. The fact is, it's never too late to start exercising. There's a lot of research, and even on the frailest older people, and we can see the change in them. It is important to start in the 50s already and start thinking about the aging process, because we know that the rate of sarcopenia is increasing after 40. So let's take charge over in the 50s, but it's even more important in the 70s and 90s. The good thing about our HUR system is the fact that if we compare exercise and exercise as medicine, the importance is to have enough resistance, and also to progress all the time as we are training, not just sticking to the same kilos and repetitions, but rather have a bit lower repetitions, maybe having even down to 2 sets of 8 repetitions, really pushing hard, and so we feel tired after that. And then we have to increase that. We can progress by increasing the resistance, by increasing the repetitions, by increasing your sets, or even looking at the timing. So how long do we actually, and playing around, how long we have the resistance. So playing around with the concentric and eccentric, and playing around with the tempo a little bit. So there's a way we can do this. And the HUR software is really great because it allows us to monitor, we can visualize that, we can collect all the data, and we can really see what's going on. We can then also do an assessment first. We do an assessment, and we do the exercise, we reassess, and then we can see how are we progressing, and therefore what kind of health outcomes we can get. And we can have the data, we can compare the data from now and then repeat it from the 12 weeks, 24 weeks, 48 weeks, even after years, because we store the data and then we can compare, we can really see how we're progressing. And then we can also use that as a motivation, not just a feedback. Feedback is great, and then we can show it to our doctors and GPs. But it's also feedback, so we know that, hey, I'm actually improving. So that's a motivating factor. So what kind of exercise should we be doing? Really, we should be looking at strength, balance, and cognition. But part of these also is then the fact that we have a social interactions, that we're training with our friends and we're getting this nice thing of working together with our friends. But also we have to make sure that we have the proper diet, that we have enough protein in our diet, because without protein, we have to get the protein from the food in order for it to grow the muscles where we store the protein. So that's a really important factor. Also making sure we have enough iron, so oxygen is moving around, and the other minerals. But protein is quite a big thing when we talk about muscles as well. The good thing also about then her equipment is that with the same equipment, you can do the testing and the training. So you don't need to have any further equipment. And also the training programs then allow us to link to the testing, and we can then change the training programs as per where we found the difficult areas are, for example, in the postural sway. Let's have a little quick look at some videos and what does it actually look like, and what do the HUR exercise equipment look like? And the good thing here is that because it's pneumatic, the exercise is safe for everyone, and we can really make sure that we can train properly, and it's always safe. We have the smart card system that then means that we can actually get, when we touch the screen, and then the computer system knows exactly what kind of program do we have. It recognizes the repetitions, it recognizes the resistance, and it can then make sure that we do exactly what we meant to do. We don't have to have our trainer with us all the time, but then we can show that the program allows us to train exactly the way we should be training. And also then we know that a trainer can see exactly what the data looks like, and also ourselves, we can go take a look at the data and we can verify really well what we actually have been doing. The exercise that I'm showing to you here are leg press, as in, to me, I always think that legs are our muscles alive. They're our largest muscle group we have. And they're the ones that allow us to stand up, but also because they're so big, they can store the protein really nicely for us. Let's look at something else. The next one then, if we look at our cognitive training, we have our training platform Sensor that then allows us to combine the cognition and motor tasks, which then allow us to really train our minds, and especially important when we talk about cognitive decline or even Parkinson's disease. But all of us, we need to have the reaction time in order to take the next step if we have the slip, trip, or stumble. So these are sort of the key things that we're looking at. So really, when we have the person in the middle, we talk about exercise as medicine and really progressive exercises. And this then leans into the quality of life. So if we train properly and train the right areas, then we can have the quality of life. And really, ultimately, we should be exercising in the right way so we have our health, our happiness and independence, and also our quality of life. So I hope that you got some new ideas for your exercises, and please contact us, please contact her, and wherever you are in the world, we'll be happy to help you to find a club that is suitable for you. Now, enjoy the conference and happy training, and hopefully we get to see soon again. Bye now from Bombay from Melbourne.